No, let's try again. There we go. Hi, everyone. Just 1 second. We had to set it up so that Deandra would be able to answer the questions on the side. So we had to log her in, and Google was being a problem. But now we got it, and I just got to push it live, and then we are going to be good to go. And for those of you that are here, we do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m., and that's Central Time. And that's in the States, and outside it's minus GMT. We just grab the links, and then we will go ahead and get started. And today I'm going to be going over adding depth and value to anything. So even in our example image, we have this half plate thing, and I'm going to show you how you can make something that's flat initially have depth and have some 3D form to it. Okay, almost done. And as always, thank you guys for coming. And got one more to do. And there we go. All right. Hi, I'm Tim Von Rieden with ConceptCookie.com, and in this live stream we're going to be going over adding the illusion of depth. And I will be talking about how I'm going to take just a flat line art image, and I'm going to be adding different hues, or not even different hues, different values and contrast to give it some depth to it. And as always, I have Deandra with me, and we're going to be answering any questions you may have, and may not even pertain to the particular live stream that I'm working on. It could be anything concept art or digital art related as well. All right, so since we had a late start, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. So we go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so there it is. And I'm going to zoom in. All right, so what is this supposed to represent? This is supposed to be, I was inspired by two things, an image in the latest issue of Imagine FX, and the chandelier, I don't know what they're called, I think chandelier plates. I believe it's where it's connected to the ceiling. It's not just hanging from a string from the ceiling. They usually have these really decorative, fancy plates that kind of sit on the ceiling. And I'm going to show you how you can make something like this and give it depth. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hide that bottom bar. Okay. So the thing with adding depth is the way that you go about doing it is all through the contrast and lighting placement. So I'm going to also have the questions open on the side just in case. Yes, I love Fooly Cooly as well. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a background, kind of a darker mid-tone gray. And I'm not going to be adding color right now because I think color is a distraction, and even though I love working with color, when you're working on it with just purely trying to create depth and the illusion of it, I think it's important for you guys to maybe do studies in just grayscale, because then it really forces you to look at the lighting that you're playing into your scene and making sure that it's coherent all the way around. Because before you can really understand color, you really have to understand lighting. And I think that's important to really understand that you can't just skip one and think that it'll be amazing when you get to the next. So with this base color, and I'm going to place all my colors on the side here, pretty much I'm going to first think about where is my lighting going to be placed. So before I even lay down any other strokes, I really need to think about where is this light source coming from, and then when I kind of decide where it's coming from, I have to stick with it, and I have to be consistent from then out. So why don't we go ahead, and I'm going to do this underneath of the line art layer so you guys can still see it. And then you know what, I'll make a copy of that line art layer, and I'll put it in the corner. Like I said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. Deandra is with us, and she's able to actually select them this time. Here, you can move here again. Okay, so then for my next color, I'm going to be choosing one that is slightly higher on the value range, something a little more mid-tone. And the reason I'm not jumping to like a highlight color right away is because I want to save that for more of the detailing and polishing pass. Right now we're just trying to build up some depth and make this object seem more like a 3D object. Oops, let me close Slack really quick. There we go. Okay. So, like I said, the light source is the first thing I want to think about, and I'm going to lay that out in a different color. So you can imagine the light source is coming from, let's do this. I never do right to left, so why don't we do that this time? So imagine this is our light source, and we're beaming it. Let me give you a better perspective scale here. In like this general direction. And when I'm choosing that, I'm pretty much laying out how I'm going to be laying out the colors from here on out. So immediately I'm thinking, okay, let's pick one of these shapes and let's start shading it. So the first one that I'm going to do is this inner one. And you know what, I'm going to do this on top of the line art layer. Because I also want to kind of give you a precursor to a tutorial I did last night about drawing on, or like when you have line art already set for you, how do you work with it? And I'm going to show you how to kind of draw on top of it. Because I think a lot of artists out there that are very strong in their line art skills, they feel very intimidated by how to approach color. But I think the best thing that you can do is just attack it without fear and draw right on top. Now that's not to say you shouldn't practice drawing below it, but oftentimes you'll get so wrapped into trying to make it look as good as the line art was that your color choices and the way that your shading won't be as strong, and you're very delicate with all your brush strokes. Where if you're drawing right on top, oftentimes it'll be faster and a little more loose. And usually the artists that work a little more looser tend to have better quality images in the end, which is kind of ironic because you think it would be if you spend more time, you'd get better quality, but not in this case.
I'm waiting for you to stop talking.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to just select them?
Yeah, so then select the question.
Over and answer them?
Oh yeah, that's right, I could do that then. Here, let me put the questions on the side over here too then. Oops.
Did you see the one I just selected?
Yeah, there we go. So someone's saying, I was asked to hold a course about perspective for beginners. Do you have material on that I could use to explain stuff more easily? Yes, so there is a value shading. It's a tutorial, not so much a course. We don't have so much courses on that subject matter yet, but we certainly have a tutorial that I could link you after the stream. So you can kind of see how we're starting to build this up where here it's the strongest, and now we got to make sure that we're staying consistent throughout. Because if the light source is coming from this direction, it would probably catch a lot of light down here, but not so much on the angle that these, I don't even know what this would be called, or this shape right here, more of like a strange triangle, but it wouldn't really be catching it nearly as strong as it is right here. And you know what, if I have this on a separate layer, I'm going to have my strongest light source be in, oops, should be more like this general region. And that's where I'm going to be highlighting most of my values the strongest. Oops. So now I'm going, this is why you want to name your layers. This is a good example. Okay, so now I'm going to do one more. So I'm choosing that same gray. I'm going to be pushing a little harder down on my tablet. Because for the first pass, I usually try to build up some foundation for me to work on top of. And then for the second one, I like to build it up even more so where the value really starts to sort of pop off the image here.
You have another question?
Do you mind reading them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so hey Tim, I was just wondering if you have heard of Gumroad. If so, would you consider making an extensive tutorial on a detailed character, perhaps?
I've not heard of Gumroad, so I'm not really sure what you are
It's like,
referring to.
I know Anthony Jones has been making. That's where he posts like his tutorials, and they're only like $1 or $5 or something.
Oh, um, mm, would I put a tutorial on there? No. No, we would put all of our tutorials on the site then. If I did make an extensive tutorial on a detailed character, it would be on Concept Cookie. And that's something that I still want to do. Just right now, my time is consumed from hopefully working on a new workshop that will be available in the fall. Okay, so now as I get to this shape right here, the illusion that I'm trying to create is that these little flower petal shapes are pushed into the plate. So this area right here is closer to the viewer than the flower petals themselves. So to give that illusion, this is where I usually like to talk about contrast. So I'm going to push this lighter gray right up against this sort of, the line art is almost creating the depth of the illusion that is pushed in. So I want to work with that, and that's why I often work with my line art. I don't just hide the layer. I don't just erase the line art. That's why I like to work on top of it, and hopefully some of the lines will show through and it will add to the composition.
Alright, next question. Which platforms would you recommend to post artwork to so people with a creative background can comment on it? So like,
Ooh, that's a good question.
yeah.
I was gonna say all the ones that Concept Cookie does, I think it's a little too extensive. But for me and my personal work, DeviantArt is, even though it gets somewhat of a bad reputation for being there's no filter, that's any kind of art can be posted, good, bad, whatever. I think DeviantArt is still a good place to host your artwork, and there have been a lot of artists that have made their living through DeviantArt. So it's not something that you should just shrug off. So I definitely think DeviantArt would be one. CG Hub would have been one if it didn't close. I think some of the new ones that are sprouting because of CG Hub closing are some good ones though. So like Draw Crowd is one that seems to have a lot of potential, even though it's still pretty new. I think that one will be a great one down the road. Definitely check out, like, I don't want to say Tumblr, but Tumblr is another great one to host. Really anywhere that you know has a lot of dedicated artists and people that check it on a daily basis, you want to host your art on those kind of sites, because those are the sites that will get you the attention you're probably wanting.
There's also like CG Hub is gone obviously, but there's ones I've been like replacing it to. Like there's concept art.org or something. And like any like forum, it's really just up to you what you want to invest in.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other one? By Feng Zhu?
That's Draw Crowd.
Yeah. Did you mention that?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's another one, but I also forget that name. But yeah, anything like that. Plus just like normal social media stuff, like Facebook.
Yeah.
Are there any digital programs that you would recommend other than Photoshop?
Oh, absolutely. Really, any of them kind of do the job for the most part. It's what you're most comfortable with personally. I will say the ones that I've experimented with that I do enjoy and I still would use on a just kind of depending on what I was working on. So Alchemy is a really great one if you're working on like mirrored images. So I did that one in the latest plant tutorial I did, and I really quickly just brought it into Mischief, or not Mischief, I opened Alchemy, and I just whipped something up really quick, and then I saved it out, and then finished it in Photoshop. So I feel like with some softwares, I still will finish it in Photoshop, but I'll start in the software. Even Mischief. Mischief has a really good line art tool and capability where it can slow down the actual speed of the line to give you smoother, crisp line art. And since Photoshop doesn't have that, I usually would like to start in Mischief first and then move on to Photoshop. So those are ones, and then you can definitely check out, like, if you enjoy more of the traditional sense, Coral Painter. There's Paint Tool Sai if you are more into like anime looking images, or even very colorful images that here Paint Tool Sai is great for. And then there's Sketchbook Pro. I know only a few people that use that one. And then from there you can use like open source ones like GIMP and Krita. So there are so many out there. It really just comes down to you just kind of testing them out. So I would test out as many as you can. And if you can't afford Photoshop, there are free softwares that attempt to do most of what Photoshop does. I will say I think still holds the crown of like what I would recommend for anyone seriously trying to pursue digital art, or Corel Painter, or like one of the higher up ones. But for the most part, you can do whatever you're looking to do in any software. All right, now really quick. So these three, let me individualize them really quick. So this one, and this shape, I tried to push toward the viewer. Now the goal, what we're going to try doing next, is pushing the other ones back. So these are closer to the viewer, the green ones, and then the pink shape, so then all of these right here, we're going to push further back. And this is all through creating the illusion of depth. So I'm going to hide that. So just one more reminder. So we're going to push the pink ones in. So now I'm going to make another new layer. So now I'm imagining, okay, if the light's coming in and it's hitting this, I have sort of this concave shape that's being pushed in here. So the light would probably hit it right here and then kind of pillow out to the edges. And now there probably is going to be a cast shadow right under this shape right here. So I'm going to leave that a little blank and just keep focusing on pillow shading each of these little concave shapes in here.
What is the name of the software you are using?
This is Photoshop CS6, so it's Adobe.
And what do you think about ArtStation?
ArtStation, isn't that not completely open to the public yet?
It's been a while. I'm not sure.
Yeah, to be honest, I know I got the invitation to put my art up there, and I still haven't yet, just because it was still in like the beta testing stage. I think that one might be another good one. I think it might be very similar to Draw Crowd, so we'll see which one of those kind of, I don't want to say triumph over the other, but I do think one will probably end up being more popular than the other, just because of how similar they are. So that one definitely has a lot of potential too. So now I'm going to be using my Alt tool, and I'm picking up the color so I can get a really nice crisp edge. You can see how I'm starting to build that illusion that it's like from the side view, it's pushed in. So this is trying to replicate right here. So now I'm going to do the same for each of these little concave shapes here.
How do you find something to draw every day?
Oof. Look around you. Usually find something in your room, take a walk, take pictures. But something I've been doing more recently is I'll bring my camera with me wherever I go, and you'll never know where something interesting might appear or inspire you. So just capture that moment really quick, or even on your phone if you need to just take a quick picture of it.
Or even just being like inspired by like a game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Just do stuff.
Alright, so now as I get to this edge right here, let me get it better. Right here, I want to create a ridge that really will kind of showcase that this forward triangle. I'm gonna start just calling these the triangles. The triangle is pushed a little more toward the viewer. Now, if you do it to one, you want to be conscious of if you're going to be doing it to the rest of them.
Somebody said, okay, here's the solution for painting for line artists. Using gradient maps. Tim, can you show us? You know what I have in mind. If you know what I have in mind.
Kind of. So what I'm doing is I'm building gradients everywhere. So like, I guess I like to pillow shade. I don't like just using the gradient tool because I like seeing the brush strokes. But pretty much what they're saying is from this point outward, you're adding a gradient. And this is what gives the illusion of depth. And I think this is what you can do really quickly with a gradient tool. But oftentimes it doesn't look quite as, I don't want to say, I'll say painterly. And I think that's why I like to actually draw in the gradient. But yeah, so if you want to add line art or add color to your line art, gradients is pretty much a key element in adding that depth.
And then you have another suggestion. Can you show us how to make like battle damage?
Yeah, that is something I usually add more toward the detailing and polishing phase. Because right now we're doing the foundation work, and I think you might get too caught up with little detailing like scratches and stuff like that. And if you start doing that too early on, you'll lose the time that you could be using to really build up a nice base and then scratch it. So build up your armor and then destroy it, if you want to say it that way. So now here, up here, is pretty much exactly what this little live stream is supposed to be all about. It's having one side, it has a one side of the lighter side. The top one could probably be slightly lighter as well, just because the light source is kind of coming from that direction. And then the other side would be more in shadow. And this right here gives that illusion of depth. Oops, there we go. So pretty much you want to repeat this everywhere and then stay coherent. And I think that's the problem that a lot of artists have, is keeping it coherent throughout. So if you want to see some battle damage, let me render out like this little area up here first, and then I'll show you what I would do to create that.
Is there a stabilizer in Photoshop CS6?
Stabilizer?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. So no, I'm not sure on that. If you mean like something that will slow down your line to create more fluid-looking lines, as of now, Photoshop does not. And that's something I really wish they had, but as of now, no. I really hope that with CS7, whenever sites come out, they'll add a feature that includes it.
Yeah, I don't think it has it. Only like Paint Tool Psi right now.
And Mischief.
Yeah.
So now the other thing is that you want to keep very flat coloring for hard surface stuff. So people always ask me like, what's the big difference between doing a hard surface object and doing more organic looking stuff? Organic stuff you want very fluid looking shading everywhere, where flat surface stuff, like for this top panel, you might want it to be pretty much one color and then have like a soft gradient either way. But for the most part, the light is going to be hitting that surface at the same angle throughout it because it's a flat surface. And that's the whole point of why it reflects light in a particular way differently than an organic piece of material would.
And the person that asked about the gradients said, no, when you're done with doing values in black and white, you can add a gradient map layer. You set up colors of the gradient in the settings and it fills your values with your color setup. That's what I had in mind.
That's what Paul does. Yeah, so I don't. That's actually a really good way to work. A lot of professional artists do that. I have a friend at Riot, and that's what he does. And he was showing me it one day, and it does work really well. It's something though that you have to practice with a lot. And in all honesty, since I never do that, I wouldn't be the one to show it to you guys without feeling like I would need to practice that technique for a few times before I show it. Because I don't want to just show you my weak understanding of the right way to do it and confuse you guys. I'd rather fully understand what I'm showing you guys. So now here's a good example of if I added a highlight to this would pull it up forward. And if I'm trying to keep this surface completely flat, I would have to bring that highlight throughout that flat surface. So this is another trick of how you add highlights to flat surfaces. So you gotta make sure you stay consistent. And I want to keep repeating that word because of how important I really believe it is in doing flat surface stuff like this. So now in this area where it's kind of pushed in, you're going to be able to see the top of the ridge on this side, but for this side, I'm going to be covering it. And it gives the illusion that we're looking down on this object, just ever so slightly. So I'm just going to color pick from the gray above it, or even the gray itself, and then edge it out.
And for a high school student, what classes do you think they should be taking to help them advance in the digital arts?
A lot of traditional, I would say, drawing, pencil skills classes, I mean. And I think those will help you learn how to observe objects and analyze them and really be able to interpret how do I recreate this on paper. And then those skills will eventually transfer to digital art when you're trying to recreate, like if you were drawing an apple in Photoshop, it's no different than doing it on paper. You're just using a different software. You're using a different way to project what you're trying to create. And instead of it being traditional paper, it's just a digital canvas. So when you get into college, definitely life drawing would be my #1 class recommendation because you'll learn a lot in that class.
And what Photoshop tool did you use for the sharp edges?
So this is all with a circle hard edge brush. No shape dynamics, just transfer turned on, and that's where the harder I push on the tablet, the more solid of a color I'll get. Because I tried it in almost all the live streams, I either try to use a circle brush or my chalk brush, and it's to kind of represent that you can create anything with just the basics. But oftentimes you need more complex tools, like let's say I was drawing a tree. Sometimes it's easier if I had like a leaf brush, or it would save me time, it's more efficient. But that doesn't mean I couldn't still spend the time and create a tree with just a circle hard edge brush. It would just take me a lot longer. So the different brushes are to kind of save you time, but that use them as a crutch. They're there to help you, but you got to still rely on your basic understanding of how to create forms, and that's why I always try to use a circle hard edge brush, because you learn more when you're not using any shortcuts. So now I'm trying to highlight the ridge in here, and I can kind of make a decision depending on how hard I think the light or how intense it is. But the gray underneath of the first ridge right here, I'm going to make pretty dark. And then the ridge that is right here, I'm going to just shade ever so lightly because it wouldn't be catching the same amount of intense highlight that the top part is. but it would still be catching some of the light from the bounce light, and I want to try to reflect that the best I can.
And then you have two questions that kind of are the same. What is a regular art day for you? Is one. And the other one is, what is your daily art routine? Like, do you do studies and such? And like, how long do you go for until you take a break?
That's a good question. I would say now that I have a full-time job, my drawing schedule changed a little bit where now I'm doing a lot of like back end work. I'm doing WordPress. I'm working a lot on social marketing stuff, and I don't get to draw as much. I would say like half my day might be committed to drawing. But when I was in school, I would definitely try to do one drawing before I started in Photoshop, and that would be a drawing on paper. Even if it was a simple little sketch, I even had this little anatomy notebook that I would try to draw like one bone or one arm or something in the book before I opened Photoshop. And I think doing something traditional and having those skills translate into digital is very important. But as of now, I would say I don't really do warm-ups as much as I probably should. Like even in this live stream, I didn't really do a warm-up for it. I'm just kind of picking it up and going. And that's not to say I recommend that though. I would always say give yourself like 5-10 minutes just to warm up, get used to using the tablet from the day before. Even if you used it the day before, you just sometimes still need a little warm up. I mean, like in basketball, you don't just get on the court and play right away. There's always that 15-minute warm up session first. I really did not like how I did that ridge, so I'm going to redo it really quick.
Is transfer the same as pen pressure opacity?
Yeah, so in CS6 they changed the name to transfer for some reason. Okay, so I'm going to do highlights and then I'm going to show you guys how to add battle damage to this. Because I guess we could consider this a shield if it went all the way around. And adding little nuances of highlights gives the illusion that there's some like irregularity to the actual surface. So it's not completely 100% flat. And I think it adds the sense that the shield was handcrafted and they were doing the best they can, but it definitely can't do as well as like if it was machine produced. So adding these little nuances will help create that illusion.
Who would you recommend talking to if you need
Why doesn't mine
critique?
update? Oh,
It does, it's just a little delayed.
For anyone of the teachers are there. This is a great question because when I was in college, I sent my portfolio stuff to an artist at High Voltage Software, and they're just this little studio that is close by to where my school was, and I was just asking the concept artist, could I get any kind of critique or review or what you think I should add, take out of my portfolio? And one of them was so nice that he even sent my stuff back, but with a paint over, like a full description of what he thinks I could do better. And the best thing that you can do, especially when getting a critique, is not getting defensive. I think a lot of artists take their art very seriously and it's very personal to them. But the best thing you can do is know that if you send it in for a critique, they're not trying to like bring you down or like showcase how much better they are than you. They're really trying to help you and show that like they have a better eye for it. They've been in the industry, they see art all day every day and this is what they do. So when they see a student's work come in, they can tell you exactly what they think needs to be fixed just through experience alone. So really trust and value the feedback that you're given. Teachers, depending on what their background in, will be able to give you some insight, but really studio and industry professionals, those are the ones that will give you probably the highest level of critique that you're looking for. Oh, do the top one.
Okay, up to this one.
Okay.
How would you do complicated engraving to give it the right texture?
Oh, this is a good example. Okay. So let's say you wanted like a little pattern. Let's see, where could I put it? Let's put it right here. This is actually something I probably should have done a tutorial on already, because this will add so much more detail, and it's so easy to do that I think this will be something you guys can take away and use. So let's say we wanted to add a little design. Let's say we wanted to add just like a little, I'm trying to think in my head, some kind of floral decorative pattern or whatever. So with that in mind, I'm going to be just adding a pure line, kind of outlining exactly what I want the pattern to be. And then by just adding some extra lines on the sides of them, it'll add the illusion that it's been like engraved or cut in. So I'm not, this wasn't planned, so I don't know what kind of symbol or engraving I'm creating right now. Just gonna run with it and see what I create here. Actually, I'm not gonna do that right there. I'm gonna copy it, paste it. So usually things like this have the sense that it is mirrored from one side to the next, symmetrical. So now if I had more time to plan this out, I'd probably make it look a little more definite. Okay, whatever this pattern is, this is the one that we're going to stick with. Okay, so now when I'm doing something like this, I'm imagining that this line was cut into the surface. So now to give the illusion of that, I need another line next to it, kind of giving it a highlight. So I'm going to grab my highlight color. Let's see, usually this is easier if I have color to work with, because then the specular will really punch it out. Let me work with a lighter value here. So now I'm working on imagining the light source is coming from overhead, so the light would be captured on the bottom of the cut, not on the top. So I'm only going to be focusing on laying light on the bottom of these edges. And this is what will give the illusion that it's been cut in. And I probably should have chosen the area that's not so highlighted, because this light is kind of throwing it off. But this is a good example of this might still happen in your work, so how do I work around it? So you just have to be very careful on how you lay this down. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to over... If I made this line too big, it might look like I added a white line next to it when it's supposed to act as a reflecting light. And I have to make sure that I'm getting it everywhere. You can see how it's better illustrated down here, where up here it's so light that I'm working on. It's kind of hard to see. Actually, this would be a good time for a question while I polish this up.
What is a good way to fix highlights when your values are blowing out or not the desired value? I find myself having to touch up areas more than I feel I should have to.
Try work. Your scale is probably too definitive from like white to black. If this was my scale and this up was white and this was black, don't try to use the whole value range. Maybe try to stick it to like something in here. Or if it's a darker typesetting, try doing like here and then maybe like touches of highlights from your white. But I think when you try to use the full range, that's when things get blown out really quickly. Yeah, let me see what this looks like from further away. So it's starting to give that illusion. I think it would work a little better if I did something more intricate, but let's keep it for like that for now. Then I can start to show you guys how to do some battle damage here. This one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is something that we've gone over before, but it's a very popular question. They said, I've recently been super discouraged about doing art. Today I got an amazing idea, but I just put it down on paper. I feel like I'm wasting time, and I want to do so much, but I always give up when I start. What should I do?
One, don't give up. And it will be frustrating. I can't sit here and tell you that it will be fine, like the more you try it'll get easier, but it will be really frustrating. And even to this day I get frustrated from time to time, like I don't feel like my work's good enough, I feel like I need to be better, I don't practice enough. You'll always have that constant internal struggle, but I think it's the way that you work through it that will define you as an artist. So I always believe there's two types of artists. There's ones that talk and there's ones that walk. Don't be a talker, because the ones that talk don't actually get anything done, or they give excuses, or they give reasons why they're not doing any art. But you'll notice that the most professional artists, they're all walkers. They don't just talk the talk, but they can follow through and show you what they can do, even on like a limited amount of time. Because like these big name artists, like they don't have a lot of time to waste or give away, and yet they're still cranking out amazing pieces. So you can't just say I don't have time or any of these other excuses. It's just that you're not using time wisely or you're not being effective with your time. I know that sounds kind of harsh, but if you do really want to make it in this industry, do not give up and push through it and keep working and don't give excuses. So if you're feeling really discouraged, just know that that happens to everyone, like every artist, and I feel that, and I can feel it really heavy from time to time where it's like, I don't even feel like I'm good enough, like why this kind of sucks. And then the next day you'll be like, oh man, I just whipped out something awesome, and you'll surprise yourself. And those are the days that make it worth it. So just know if you're having an off day, don't let it bum you out. Just know it happens, and that you'll keep trying at it.
Just like with anything else, like practice makes perfect. Like nobody is like, for like any sports or whatever, like running around for like a long time is really hard until like you build up the stamina, you know? So
Exactly.
just keep going and like you'll get there.
All right, now so for this battle damage, I'm imagining that I'm literally like cutting in and I'm like slicing areas out. And the way that I can do this most effectively is if I first slice it out, making sure that this background color here kind of seeps through, because you would see through it, or you wouldn't see through it. You would see, because there's a piece missing, you would see the color behind it. And then I would grab probably a highlight color and then just edge it out very, very slightly to give the illusion that it's been cracked out. And that's how I would do my battle damage. And if you really wanted it everywhere, I mean, it may take some time, but if you're willing to give it the effort that it deserves, you can definitely make it look like some really awesome battle damage shield.
What size canvas do you prefer to work on? Or what do you suggest beginners to use?
Work large. I would say don't work on like a 4x4 at a 72 resolution. Work with your pixels. We're given digital art for a reason. Like it's not limited by our resources. So like with pen and paper, you can't. Like if you're working on an 8.5 by 11 paper, there's no way to increase the resolution or paper size. But with something like this, why would I limit myself to something small when I can make it incredibly big? And if I needed to zoom in, I could. And for print purposes, you want to work larger. So I guess for my recommendation is try working at a 300 resolution at whatever size you think. If this is something you're going to print, if you're going to print it at 8.5 by 11, make it 8.5 by 11. And from there on, you can kind of figure it out.
What are some good art books to read?
Whew. Oh, that's a fantastic question. Man, I don't know if I should give you my recommendation of like art books or art of books. I think the one that is kind of a staple for any artist is Color and Light by James Gurney.
Hmm.
It is a spectacular book that I think originally was intended for painter artists, but the digital art community has kind of taken it and made it kind of their own. Because the theories that are talked about in the book still apply to what we create, and I think uh, it applies more to digital painting in a lot of ways than a lot of art of digital books try to create, because they talk about things that are more software specific rather than being more art related. Where his book is very much just pure art, color, and light theories that apply to what we create. So that would probably be my number one recommendation. An anatomy book, the one I have is by Giovanni Savardi. He has models that aren't conventional. They're very much like lean or ragged or older that can really showcase, I think, what is a more accurate human anatomy rather than just like bodybuilders or supermodels. And I would definitely recommend one of those books. And I guess from there on, just reading art of books is pretty good. Depending on which one. You don't want to just buy one just because you like the movie. You really should do some research on if it's an actually good art book, because oftentimes the artists that work on the movie don't work on the art book. They usually send it to a publisher, and they have an editor, and um, from there on, it could get kind of lost, like all their artistic inspirations. And then lastly, the art of a specific artist, so an individual, those books are ones that I really enjoy and enjoy looking through.
Tim, can I send you some of my works for critique?
You can. I do warn you though, for since I do get a lot of people sending me their work, it usually takes me about a week to respond just because of how much I have to do and just my own personal life. Like once I'm done with work, I do like spend some time doing things that aren't art related. So yes, you can send me your work and I will get back to you with some feedback. And for those of you that are interested in the fall workshop that's coming up, that I will be able to not only give you a critique, but I'll give you full paint overs. I'll give you kind of some insight as what I would do to improve the piece as a whole. Okay, and if there's anything else you guys want to see on what this topic is kind of relating on, just the depth, the illusion of depth, I can work on it really quick because I know we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to keep just kind of doodling this. But if you want to see anything specific, let me know. Or maybe I'll add color to this because I feel like that's something that's been questioned about. First, I'm going to get into this little area here, and then I'll show you guys how I would add color to something that's done in grayscale.
What do you think is better for beginners, quality or quantity? I, for one, can spend only like time on one sketch and it feels wrong for like an hour.
This is a really tough question because I feel like I'm going to be very contradicting. Well, while I was in school, I would spend a lot of time on one piece at a time. But now looking back, it probably would have been better if I would have tried to work faster and worked on more pieces at a time. But I can completely understand the whole want to really make one piece really nice. But I think in the time, or in doing so, you lose a lot of time doing like detailing that really is ineffective or just time wasting in general. Like I look back at a lot of my college pieces where I'm like, man, this took me like 15 hours, and nowadays that should only take me about 3.5. But I think by doing that, you do learn. So either or, as long as you're doing art, I think that's what's important here. So as long as you're doing art, I can't really recommend one over the other because I could tell you all day that yeah, it's better to do as many as you can, but I didn't even do that myself. So how can I tell someone else to do that? Where I felt like nowadays, what I spending so much time on individual pieces helped me in the long run. But as long as you're doing art, that's what's important.
Can you say the name of the human anatomy book again? that you recommend?
Yes. Here is his name. Let me double check that too. Giovanni Slibardi. So it is Drawing Human Anatomy, and he has a few drawing books, but that one is my favorite one. And I think he just does a really great job at capturing anatomy.
If someone is too poor for art books, are there any possibilities to get some, or does one have to use nature, games, or films for inspiration only?
Uh, I don't think you need anything specific for inspiration. It could literally be anything. And I think we often trap ourselves into thinking it has to be something specific or related to something or looking like something. But in my opinion, you can be inspired by the way the sun shines through the leaves, or even things that may not seem inspiring. Like I've been putting the new Woodkid music video on repeat all day, and I'm really inspired by the visuals in that. And obviously, they're not concept art related, but you can relate the images or the compositions or even the tone of the music to the way that you're drawing. So literally anything can be inspiring, but things like art books and art of books kind of push you in the direction of how to add more depth to what you're trying to create in terms of, is this professional looking? So that I do recommend getting art books for being current with what art is modern, I guess I would say.
Um, if you want to just get like a sneak peek, I know that there are always like a few pages of the art book online for free. But other than that, there's always like used bookstores, half price books. You can find a lot of art books there that are like really cheap. Um, but yeah, or like anything. There are ways. Can you give some advice on where to place cast shadows?
Yeah. One, I would probably look at references from life, but I almost want to do a little sketch somewhere on here. Let's say using that same light source. So let's say this ball sphere thing that we have here was wearing a hat. Now give me a second while I draw this. Okay. So imagine that the light source is coming from here. He does not have a rat tail. There we go. So imagine the light source is coming from the same direction. This cap right here would be casting a shadow, and I'm imagining it would be cutting right here as well. Or you know what? I'm going to push, let me redo that hat so it's easier to see. Alright, so this is the head, and we are going to be placing a cap right on him. Okay, so this is our little Ness character. So if the light is coming from that direction, the hat cap, or the lid, would be casting a shadow on this side of the face. So what I would do is, a lot of people would think, oh, well, you would just add the shadow and work from there. But instead, I'm going to keep that midtone that I used for my skin, if this was my skin color. I'm going to keep that as my shadow color. Now what I'm going to do, and the trick here is when I add lighting, I'm not going to add lighting to where that cap's lid adds a shadow. Rather, I'm going to add the lighting to it, giving the illusion that I'm adding a shadow, but really all I'm doing is I'm adding a light. And that contrast is what will give you that cast shadow. So if you can just keep thinking, okay, where is my light direction coming from? And then staying consistent with, okay, well, the light would not be hitting, I feel like my arrow should be more like this. The light is not being able to be captured down here. Now, you might still get some bounce lighting, so it's not to say that you won't get any lighting underneath the lid, but for the most part, you'll get this really harsh contrast shadow, and that contrast is what will give you your cast shadow. Go ahead and just try to run through them as fast as you can, because I'm going to add color and then end it. Here we go.
Any new information on the class you'll be doing?
Yes, the registration will start next month, and we will begin the classes in September. And I am really excited. I'm going to start working on actually recording the tutorials probably next week, and then I'll kind of share with you guys any new information that I kind of decided that I'm going to do the tutorials on, or any of that information. So really quick, I just made a new layer, and it's a color blend mode. And you can either use color or hue, kind of depending on what look you're going for. But now using my brush tool, I'm going to paint right over. And this will obviously give a really strong impression of gold. But let's say I wanted to add a few other colors too. And this is where I like to use my eraser tool a lot. If I'm adding color, like let's say I wanted a nice little gradient in these petals, like you can add really nice color tonal shifts by using or laying it out pretty thick and then using your eraser tool. And I guess just kind of depending on what final color that you're looking for to create, you have to play with a few maybe different color layers and then you'll get it eventually. But for me, I'm going to work like this from here. Oh.
That's actually kind of related to what you're doing right now.
Oh, you go.
I wanted to ask if you had advice on working with colors. I seem to get good pictures when doing grayscales, but I do not get how colors and hues work in different lights and shadows.
That's a good question. I guess depending on what material you're working with, so like if I'm imagining this is like a rustic gold, I'm going to lay out that gold really heavy, but I'm going to go in with my eraser tool and I'm going to let some of that grayscale show through, and it'll give the impression of age and years, or what in the game art industry we call wear and tear. And it's just through time, some of the color will fade, and you'll get some irregularity to the actual color laydown. So you can see, maybe if I zoom in, it's a little better. It's still a little blurry, but you kind of get the impression that I'm going for here. And don't just feel like you can rely on one color layer mode and then you're done. So from here, I would probably make another color layer mode, or I would just purely work on a normal layer and just add color on top. But let's say I wanted to add some like green. And a lot of it is just through trial and error. So like right now, I know that gold sometimes has this either blue or green off color when gold gets rustic or oldish looking, or even like if it's a fake gold, you'll see that green-blue color up here. So I'm going to try adding it in a few places, and if I like it, I'll work with it. If not, I can just delete the layer. So never feel afraid to at least try it, because you never know if it'll be exactly what you were looking for or not.
And there's another question related to that too. When adding color after you're done with your grayscale bottom layer, how do you keep your colors looking vibrant and fresh and not grayed out? Are you using multiply to let the grayscale through, or something else?
Grayscale bottom layer. So you can add, like oftentimes I'll add overlay layers on top. Lately I've been trying to pull back. I think a lot of the times I rely on overlay and multiply too much. So I've been trying to pull back from that and just use more natural colors. But like let's say we wanted to make the shine more intense, I would make a new layer, change it to overlay or soft light. One of those two would work. And then let's grab one of the metal brushes. Oh, my eraser, hold on. So like let's say I'm going to do that, and then I would use my eraser tool. So then you can get some nice texture too by using an overlay or multiply. And then usually it'll come off pretty strong for the most part, and that's when you can just lower the layer's opacity. And I don't know how well you can see it on the stream. Let me zoom in. So you can see before and after. And then from there you can change like the hue of the actual color. I can make the saturation really intense. But for the most part, actually I kind of like the blue. But for the most part, I'm going to leave it as is. And then I think what you're trying to say is like, what if I really wanted to make my colors just more fresh looking? Let's make another new layer. And I'll change it to, we'll do overlay again. And I would grab one of the colors in my actual pieces so I can stay consistent in the color choice. Then I would make the highlighted area more intense and then kind of pillow shade out. But like I said, I try to avoid doing this now because this also adds a saturation, isolation, contrast. So all the attention will be right here. And obviously I want the attention to be over here, but when it can be too much, that's where we get into what we were talking earlier, where it becomes overblown. It looks oversaturated. And that's something you don't want to achieve.
Your next question is, I don't know if you were asked this earlier, but how do you get in industry? Do you just apply like a normal job, or is it who you know that gets you in?
If I was being honest, I would say it is who you know that gets you in. Most of my friends have gotten their jobs based on who they know. And that's why I think art school, traditional art schools still stand to this day, because that's not marketing. What's that called when you are
Networking?
networking? The networking you just can't achieve online. You can, I shouldn't say can't, you still can. It's much harder than when you're physically around them all the time learning and trying to go down the same career path as you. So I would say it's a lot of it is who you know. But having said that, I forgot who I'm going to quote right now, but he said that top or talent is always uh, needed. It's always needed for any job industry you have. So if you have the skills, you can still get a job no matter where it is. But I think oftentimes we struggle as artists to find jobs because our schooling either didn't teach us enough, or we feel like uh, the industry is biased where it is who you know, which is very true. But just know if you keep trying hard, and I'm not just saying like one of those cheesy campaigns like, if you believe you can achieve, but you really have to put forth the effort. You really have to dedicate yourself to this industry, and every day you have to be drawing. And that's something that I truly believe if you want a job, you really have to dedicate a big portion of your time and energy to doing this on a daily basis. Okay, I'll take a few more questions and then we'll go ahead and end the stream.
Would you consider composition to be the most important fundamental to landscape painting, or would it be something else? If so, what fundamental or skill would you consider to be the most important?
That's a good question. I would say since I don't usually do environments, I probably don't have the experience to answer this to the fullest that I probably could. But from the what I do know, yes, composition is probably the most important aspect of doing environments. I know that that's why a lot of environment artists do thumbnailing first, try to really capture the overall look of the scene before they go in and start detailing. And that's really important. Also, balance between the entire piece and if it's able to read well to the viewer. So does the piece itself tell a story that I can easily see? Feng Zhu had a few tutorials on this, on being able to, I forgot the exact wording he used, but where you're able to exactly tell what the city is, what you're supposed to be doing in it. Is this a good city? Is this a villain city? And things like that.
What is a good resource to learn more about the brushes from Coco? I love the Von Everything brush for color, but I'm lost with the rest of them.
Thank you. I'm glad. I haven't, man, I loved my Von brush for so long, but I haven't recently, where I tend to stick with the circle hardage brush or the chalk brush. And as I say that, I've been experimenting with making new brushes. I guess I can give you guys a quick preview. But for the rest of them are supposed to be used more as specifics. So they aren't meant to be used for like shading or blending. Where things like this is more for like a surface of a rock, or things that are deteriorating or have a certain look. So things that are meant to be used for specifics aren't meant to be used for like blending or laying out foundations or things like that. So for doing foundation work, stick with basic brushes. So like a chalk brush, any brush that's very simple in its nature. It's like, not so much that one. The skin brush I used for an entire year, only the skin brush for a year, just because of how it had kind of like that chalk traditional feel, or even pastel. And it was very easy for me to translate what I wanted to see on paper just using the skin brush. So don't feel like you have to rely on other brushes. So even like a chain link brush, you're obviously not going to be using that to blend color, but just know that the basics will give you and do anything you want that you're trying to achieve, and other brushes are just meant to help save you time. There's other tools that are meant to help you.
Would you say the technique dark against light would be a big part in learning how to get better?
Yes. So that is pretty much the same thing as contrast. It is contrast, and I think that adds a lot to what. Um, you know what? I might just pull up an example really quick. So I did this last night for Kent for Blender Cookie, and oftentimes I try to add line art to my work, at least in the end. But nowadays I've learned that like through contrast. So let me show you down here. Let me add a new layer. So like the contrast between this yellow and this yellow right here adds the whole illusion that this area and this fold of fabric are not the same. And even though if you cut off the bottom, you can still tell that there's a ripple, there's a wrinkle, and that's due to that contrast of this darker color butting up against this lighter color. Now, the same could be said for like lighting. So like for this little thin piece of fabric that is kind of ribboning around the dress itself, that contrast is giving you the appearance that it has more of a glossy, silky appearance. And that's also just due to the contrast between the light and the dark. It has a higher range than the dress does. Where the dress, and this is what I was talking about earlier, like if this is my white and this is my black, let me do a quick little, so that's my white and black, a really poor example of white and black, but white and black, regardless, the things that have more of a reflective surface, such as this ribbon, use maybe like this much of the gradient scale, well, maybe not that low. So something like this. Whereas the dress doesn't use this much of a range. It may use from like here to here. But they're still giving you the appearance of value, but oftentimes artists think you always have to have this for everything, but that's not true. It depends on the surface and the material that you're working with. So just know you are supposed to work with contrast, but that doesn't mean it's supposed to be overblown. You really have to think about the fabric, or not even the fabric, the material and the surface that you're working on. Okay, so now I'm going to try to rush through these.
When I paint in grayscale and have to paint a subject with a full black detail in it, like a white bird with black feathers, the blacks I paint don't blend well with the rest of the bird. Any ideas why?
Paint in grayscale and have to paint it. You know what? I'm going to bring up Alan Williams' bird that he did yesterday. Or not yesterday, but that I saw. So this is a great question where how do I work with black and white materials? So it might not be the value or the contrast that you're adding, but literally the subject matter might be super dark or super light. And this is a great example that I'm going to pull up right here. This is done by Alan Williams. He's by far my favorite pencil traditional artist. And you can see how on the bird's feathers there is literally no like value contrast. But you still get the impression and the overall look that it's a 3D, it has value, but it's not reflecting any light. But then when you get to the eye area where, yeah, the surface does become more reflective, you do add more of that contrast. So yeah, it may be a little tough with things that don't have a reflective surface, but you're still trying to add value and make it look like an actual object. But just know that not everything in nature is going to have that intense reflecting scale. And I'm trying to find another example that I could use really quick. Here's another one of his pieces. And you can see where the feathers back here, just add that little bit of contrast where this feather is on top of the feather underneath. Let me add a color so it's easier to point out. But the line of contrast right here that he has with the feathers, that's what gives the illusion that one feather is on top of the other feather. Or even these smaller ones up here. Just having that little bit of shadow underneath of this feather on top gives the illusion of what you're looking for. How do you know how hard or soft to make the edges of cast shadows? It just depends on the object itself. If it's a rimmed cap like we did in our example up here, it's probably going to be more of a solid shadow, and it also depends on how far away the light source is. So you really have to have a deep understanding of lighting, and that's why Color and Light is such a great book to have, because once you have that deeper understanding of lighting, you can really be able to create your images and form much more accurate. Someone's asking, how are you adding that color to the shield? So I did that with a separate color layer mode that I created, and I just added yellow all around. Normally I don't work in grayscale. I just wanted to show you guys really quick one way of doing it. Like even this looks very much unfinished to me, where this looks like I just added a color layer on top. So then from here I would probably make another new layer and add more colors to blend it in some more. What would you say is the best tip to learning to draw the body and the face realistically to the point where you can draw people and be confident the way they look as they should? Just keep doing it every day. Draw people, and that's something that I'm really interested in. I like drawing characters, so I try to at least. I haven't been doing it as much recently, but I have a sketchbook dedicated just to drawing people, and I think that the more you do it, you'll learn things like, oh, okay, the eye iris or the eye's pupil should be lined up with the corner of the mouth if you're looking at them straight on. And these little things that you'll notice here and there, you'll pick up on and you'll be able to translate into your character work. Now that's not to say that you really have to be analyzing your work while you're doing it. So you can't just sketch something without thinking about it and not really trying to learn something from it. So if you're trying to get better at noses, yeah, it's good to draw noses, but really look at how you're drawing it, the different shapes that you're drawing, how is lighting affecting the nose. And the more that you really observe it and be able to interpret it, the better in the long run. And I'm just going to take a few more before we end this off. Someone's asking, how much will the class in the fall cost? It'll probably be around $200, and it'll be a 5 to 6 week session. It'll be, I don't want to say intense, but it'll be enough where you feel like not only is it worth the money that you're paying, but you really come out of it feeling like a whole bunch more confident than you were starting out. So I really want to make sure that this isn't just a class of watch me draw something pretty and have you guys maybe pick up one thing or two. I really want it to be, I want to show you guys the basic guidelines, and these are the fundamentals that for sure will increase the quality of your pieces, and that's kind of the goal of the course itself. So someone's asking, ever since I've gotten into art seriously, I'll go through these phases where 1 month I'll be super inspired and draw and paint all the time, and then the next month I won't draw or paint at all. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you stay inspired? This is something that I think we talked a little bit about earlier, where everyone has those days, and sometimes, yeah, it might be weeks. I know earlier this year I had like a solid month where I was feeling pretty down on the way that I was coloring and shading my pieces. I felt like I was using a lot of tips and tricks, and I wasn't being genuine to myself as an artist. And I think that through time, you just kind of get through it, and the more that you push through it, sometimes it might make it even worse to the point where, yeah, you'll get kind of down on yourself for what could be a month. But I would recommend just sticking with it and knowing that you'll go through that and just maybe do something else. Maybe try reading a different book, watch a movie, watch something or do something that's kind of out of your comfort zone or out of what you would normally do, and hopefully you'll be inspired from that. Someone's asking, if you want to become a concept artist, what other programs would you suggest other than Photoshop or even Sci? You could do open source ones such as GIMP or Krita if you really are money stricken, but if you want to be more in a professional sense, I would definitely say Coral Painter is another huge one, but I still would say Photoshop is probably the #1 program I would suggest. Someone's asking, John Park mentioned always seeking out machinery for concepts. Do you ever try to immerse yourself in a particular environment for styles and influences? Oh, absolutely. I feel like a lot of my work is very organic, so I love me and my friend Kat, we will go on like nature walks, or we'll try to find little ponds and just kind of walk around it or take pictures. And I fully believe that, yes, things like that will inspire you and that will translate into your work. Okay, so I'm going to cut it off here. We went up about 20 minutes over just doing questions. I want to thank you guys for how responsive you're being, especially in these live streams. I really hope that you guys are picking up from this and learning something and hopefully enjoying just having this little chat, even though I feel like I'm talking to myself at a computer screen with the Enderer right here. But I want to thank you guys for coming to this live stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. That's Central Time. And I guess really quick, For Concept Cookie, we have the new tutorial coming out tomorrow from Purple Keklian. I think maybe a few of you know her, and she does one all about color and adding interesting colors to your piece without it being overblown. And it's a great tutorial. She's one of my favorite color artists. And then in the near future, I have one about this, and this one started as line art, and I'm going to kind of talk you guys through how you work on top of line art. And then I have one more coming out on adding depth using contrast soon. So stay tuned. We got a lot coming good in the works here. I guess really quick, or maybe I'll show you guys next week. I've been to two different conventions these past 2 weekends, and I bought some cool stuff, but I'll show you guys what I got next week instead, since we're already way over the time limit. So thank you guys again for coming, and DeAndre, you want to say bye?
Goodbye.
All right. Bye, guys.